Gee, being a pyro is tough work. All of my enemies keep out of my flamethrower's range and I can't seem to hit them for a lot of damage with my shotgun. I wish there was a solution for this conundrum. Introducing the Flare Gun, the latest in fire technology. With this new secondary, you'll be able to engulf enemies in flames without them even being close to you. Yes, I'd say the Flare Gun was a pretty huge game changer for the pyro. Before it was introduced, pyro really didn't have much of a chance at attacking those out of their range. They were at a total disadvantage when it came to classes like heavy and sniper due to them being able to take out pyros from a safe distance. This all changed in 2008 though, and pyro now had a chance of fighting back with the addition of dealing huge damage if they hit consecutive shots, and that was really the main upside to the Flare Gun at the time. 30 damage per shot with a 100% critical hit against burning players, and it aided against pyro's shortcomings with range, opening the pyro up for more interesting variations down the road. As much of a unique secondary as it was at the time, it was a very simple weapon and is still the most mechanically simple Flare Gun out of the four the pyro has. Its main uses come when dealing with those previously mentioned enemies that are just out of your reach and in more combat oriented loadouts. This typically includes the degreaser due to its faster switch speeds, making for easier crit shots with the flares. What's interesting is that the original Flare Gun is still the only one to do full crits on burning enemies, while the rest do mini crits or require something else for that crit. Speaking of those other flares, let's move on to the Detonator, the second Flare Gun released back in the Uber update of 2011. The Detonator is very much a utility weapon compared to the original, and its stats reflect that as well. Like previously mentioned, it only deals mini crits against burning players. While it still rewards consecutive hits, it does so in a smaller way, which isn't helped due to it having a minus 25% damage penalty. It also has another downside of dealing plus 50% damage to the user. This in turn, however, can be interpreted more as a helpful stat, which I'll talk about in a short while. The last thing you need to know is that the alt fire detonates the flare as the weapon's name suggests. Heck, I should have just started with that fact if I'm honest. Anyway, that's all the ins and outs for it. Now, what would the best use for this weapon be if its stats point towards it being a worse Flare Gun than the original? Well, this Flare Gun allows you to flare jump. Boy, it's been a while since I've done that. But yes, flare jumping is a major component on why the Detonator is so renowned compared to the others. The Detonator really opened up a whole plethora of movement options for Pyro, and keep in mind that this was a whole 6 years before we'd even seen a thermal thruster. The plus 50% damage to the user stat isn't there just for show. It genuinely helps push the Pyro when flare jumping. In fact, I don't think it would even be possible without that stat added there. It is also a popular choice among those Pyros that like to gain clips of jumping around and extinguishing people, my favourite being Christianma. So yes, the mobility factor is what you will mainly be using the Detonator for, as the mini crit stat isn't really that tempting to try a lot of the time. And yeah, you can ignite multiple enemies at once, which is great for crowd control and to finish them off if they get too far away from you, but allowing for more movement options is what makes it truly great. Slap on a degreaser for fast switches when attacking from out of nowhere, and maybe an extinguisher if you want to go for some pyro gardens. The Detonator has plenty of uses outside of the original's damage boost on burning enemies, and stands on its own feet as a great mobility / utility weapon. From mobility to supporting your team, we go to the Man Melter. Released in that same year's Australian Christmas update in December, the Man Melter benefits those pyros who like to support their team with defense and air blast assistance to put burning teammates out. Not only are the projectiles 50% faster than every other flare gun, it doesn't require ammo, allowing a pyro to have a fighting chance that their primary runs out of ammo. The biggest change to the flare gun meta up to this point, however, is its extinguishing ability. Just like the flamethrowers, pressing the alt fire with this weapon will extinguish teammates. Unlike those weapons though, you will gain a guaranteed critical hit to use on your next shot and can store up to 36 of them. The only downside to this is no random crits, but let's be real, that's to be expected when you can literally store crits. Support is really what this is made for. It may have come with the flog in the update, but it honestly can work with any primary. What I mean by that is that while you air blast with your flamethrower, the Man Melter can bring the extinguishing part, saving those air blasts for reflecting projectiles instead. This can be useful for those primaries that take more ammo to alt fire like the backburner and the greaser, though that being said, switching so frequently could cause problems while in a fight. That's not to say it couldn't work, however the time it takes could cost you a life or two. But let's get to the actual use now. Supporting your team when on the back foot benefits both you and your team. They get put out and you gain 3 tasty critical hits. The faster speed of the projectiles also makes it easier to hit said shots, and 90 damage per crit is very useful for taking out smaller health classes like scouts and spies, whom you'll likely see more if you're defending from a group of enemies. If you're playing like this, chances are the stock flamethrower and home wrecker is best, as you have plenty of chances to air blast with stock and the ability to help fellow engineers with a home wrecker. If you want to use it as an alternative extinguisher instead, use whatever primary you like. I suggest using it like the support weapon it's supposed to be, but hey, use it however you want. It doesn't need to be said, but use any of these flares how you want. I'm just here to suggest the best ways you can use them. And now we come to the final flare gun, the Scorch Shot. Released back in the Pyromania update on June 27th, 2012, this can be seen as an attack / defense hybrid weapon. It can be used to apply pressure to enemies when attacking, and it can do it when when the enemy is attacking you as well. This can be seen with the stats, as flares knock back the target and explodes when hitting the ground, and if the enemy is already on fire, they get knocked back even further. These show that it can work when attacking, as it prevents those attempting to attack you from getting too close, and when you're on the defense, the knockback can hold them back for a little longer while your teammates arrive with backup. Or you could just harass enemies from afar. I'm not going to hide that people use it for that reason the most, but I do like using weapons in more than one way. The stats also include the 100% mini crits against burning players like the Detonator, as well as minus 35% self-damage force and minus 35% damage penalty, again like the Detonator but with different numbers. As you can imagine, the self-damage force allows for flare jumping as well, but nowhere near as effectively as the Detonator's jumps. The Scorch Shot makes for an excellent weapon for beginner pyros who can't aim the other flares easily. While the radius for the Scorch Shot when it hits the ground isn't that big, it can obviously hit multiple enemies, allowing for that defensive use to shine through again. Unlike any of the other flare guns, there isn't really a specific kind of loadout that shines through more than another. There is one primary that is hugely beneficial in tandem with the Scorch Shot however, and that is the Dragon's Fury. The newest and most unique primary for the Pyro, the Dragon's Fury deals 300% damage to burning players, essentially doing 90 damage for each fireball if you hit them over and over. Using the Scorch Shot alongside the Dragon's Fury can allow for much larger damage to be dealt in an easier way. With the Scorch Shot knocking enemies back, it allows for the Pyro to switch back to the primary and deal massive damage really easily. This of course shows another reason on why this flare gun in particular is good in both attack and defense. Overall, the Pyro is a flare gun that fits pretty much any situation they find themselves in. Combo Pyros will find the original flare gun to be very effective. Those who crave more mobility with the addition of being able to have a functional secondary still will find the Detonator to be very handy. Those who want a more supportive role and be rewarded by doing so will find a Man Melter to be very useful, and those who want an easier time aiming, hitting enemies back and an overall more flexible flare, the Scorch Shot is proven to provide in all of those areas. It would be very interesting to see what could be done with a new flare gun in the future if a brand new one is ever introduced. Pyro has plenty of choice to begin with, but in the flare gun department they have no trouble in what kind of role they want to provide for their team. I personally find myself using the original far less than the three successors due to the fact that they are far more fun to use. That's not to say the original isn't good, it's just that Pyro has so much choice it's hard to stick to just one. But that's just me. I'd like to know what you all think of the various flare guns Pyro has. Maybe you're more of a Man Melter Pyro supporting your teammates, or maybe you like to surprise enemies from time to time with a Detonator, or perhaps you just really like the original flare gun due to how reliable its damage can be. Whatever your thoughts are, be sure to share them. And as always, this has been your Fem Pyro enthusiast BonOakley signing off. See you guys in the next one.
Hi there! Thanks ever so much for watching. Please consider watching them to see more of us, especially me.